Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. It has been a week. Had some unforeseen circumstances take place last week. Wasn't able to do the show. With that being said, we are still going to do the Mariners season recap and the Seattle Storm season recap. So it's going to be a little bit of a bigger episode because of those things, as well as a couple new additions. And you might be able to tell what one of those new additions would be, considering what I've got on here. But with that being said, we've got a long slate of things to go over, so we're just going to kind of get into things as per usual. Over the past week of October 12th through the 18th, we've got a lot of news from Seahawks, a little bit of Mariners, Sounders, Storm, a little bit of Storm. Kraken, I'll just go ahead and say it there. Kraken is part of the show now. We have another edition that we'll get to at the very end of the show. We have a cool clip for you relating to Kraken, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're just going to launch into the Seattle Seahawks here. Over the past week, they took on the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football. They would lose that game 20-23. Tough game on the road. Always tough to go play in Pittsburgh at Heinz Field. They've got a good football tradition there. Essentially, football's like a religion over there in Pittsburgh. You know, they've always seemed to have a good defense. Just to kind of go over post-game thoughts. Gino Smith played well as a backup could, especially for a guy who hasn't really taken meaningful snaps since 2017. But obviously, he's no Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson plays in this game, the Seahawks are more than likely taking home the victory, considering that it was just a 3-point margin of error. Alex Collins played well. Chris Carson did not play this game due to a neck injury. Alex Collins really sort of stepped in, had 100 yards, played well considering all the circumstances. Offensive play calling remains to be an issue. There's got a lot of talent on this roster, from DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Got the tight ends involved. Will Dissly scored a touchdown. Gerald Everett had a big 40-yard completion. But still, it seems like we might be looking at somewhat of a nullified Shane Waldron offense. It's kind of interesting to note that, and I don't really want to put the blame on him, just considering all the things that we were told, and it's not exactly, we're not getting what's just promised. Jamal Adams continues to struggle with catching interceptions. There was a tip pass that went straight up in the air early in the game that went through both Darrell Taylor's hands and Jamal Adams. That one can probably be forgiven. The second one, late in the fourth quarter, that would have more than likely taken us taken the Seahawks and put them in scoring position, late with the ball, avoided overtime, hit him in the face. That's an issue, and interceptions have been an issue for Adams throughout his young career. The defense needs to be more prepared. I mean, that goes out to the coaching staff and just putting players in position to succeed. The defense was able to slightly tighten up, but plays such as allowing defensive end Benson Mayowa to guard Steelers running back Najee Harris in coverage in the red zone are unacceptable. So that stuff like that can't happen. You cannot have a defensive end covering a running back, hardly ever. And then most of the game was kind of dulled down due to the injury to Darrell Taylor. That was pretty scary. We'll kind of speak on that more here in a second. But it was, this is a game where a lot of grown men, big, strong guys are running at each other. And, when that is happening, you're more than likely going to see your fair share of scary injuries. So we do have some good news on that there in a second, though. Heading into stat leaders, passing. For the first time in just about a decade, Russell Wilson would not be in this category. Gino Smith, 23 completions on his 32 attempts, 209 yards and 1 touchdown. As you can see, no interceptions. That's good. Was able to, 9 completions isn't bad at all. Was able to really, like I said, he played as good as a backup could, considering all the circumstances. On the ground, Alex Collins, as we talked about, 20 carries, 101 yards, 1 touchdown. There was a drive in the third quarter where they just fed Alex Collins. Alex Collins did his job, especially stepping in for Chris Carson. Receiving-wise, DK Metcalf led the team with 6 receptions for 58 yards. Tackles-wise, Bobby Wagner had 14 total, 8 solo to take home the tackling crown for that game for the Seahawks. And then turnover-wise, the only turnover that the Seahawks were able to actually force was a Kerry Hyder Jr. fumble recovery. So players of the game, offense has to be Alex Collins. I mean, you might be able to argue Gino Smith, but in all reality, Alex Collins was basically the offense in this game. And then defense, Trey Brown. Trey Brown is a guy that has stepped up. And this is his first game really of the year. I mean, it's something to consider that he's a rookie and hasn't really been able to play at all. And he comes in, in a primetime game, Sunday Night Football in Pittsburgh of all places, and really came up and made the most of his opportunities that he got in this game. The first snap that he got in the first quarter, the Big Ben threw it right at him, played great coverage. Late in the game in the fourth quarter, the Steelers had a man open on the sideline. Ben threw it to that receiver. Looked like he had a surefire first down. Trey Brown got square, was able to make the tackle and prevented that conversion, made the Steelers punt the ball away. So Trey Brown is somebody that you should be excited for looking as we continue on throughout the season at the cornerback position, a position that has been a struggle for the Seahawks here. But that rookie has shown some flashes so far in just his first, real game. So that's exciting to look at. Injury news, so we're going to get into that. Never the fun part of the show where we have to talk about any team's injuries. Prior to game time, Russell Wilson and Chris Carson were placed on IR due to these sort of new IR rules that came into play in the last year in the pandemic season. They only have to stay on the injured reserve list for 3 weeks. Carson's still dealing with a neck injury, both able to return week 10 versus the Packers. And then prior to game time as well, Cedric Ogbuehi, offensive tackle, was ruled out. The game day inactives against the Steelers were John Reed, Dakota Shepley, Cedric Ogbuehi, Stone Forsythe, Taylor Mabry, and LJ Collier. Collier, 4 times in 6 weeks that he has been a healthy scratch for the Seahawks. That is not exactly a good indication. And it'll be interesting to see what might happen come contract time for him. Post-game, cornerback Sidney Jones IV exited the game with a chest injury. Offensive guard Damian Lewis exited with a shoulder injury. And then after a scary sight on the field where Darrell Taylor had to be carted off, it was reported after the game that he was alert and had all use of his extremities. His CT scans were clear, and he was able to fly home with the team back to Seattle the night of the game, and still has to do some scans as he's back here. But overall, a scary sight to see. You never really want to see somebody get carted off, let alone see him on the field, laying down for any sense of time, really. But the preliminary reports that came after the game Sunday night, as well as early this morning on Monday morning, was that Darrell Taylor was able to, get back home, fly with the team. His earlier scans look good. No indication if he'll play this week, and I don't think it really matters. What matters, especially with any neck injury, is that he's doing okay. That's, it's a scary thing to see. In team-related notes, on October 12th, the team released 4-year starting quarterback Trey Flowers. Trey Flowers has been a polarizing player for this team, a guy that was a taller defensive back, transitioned from safety, and ultimately wasn't really able to fit in at the cornerback position. The initial report stated that Flowers requested his release. Head coach Pete Carroll stated on his press conference post that move that this was false, saying that it was just time to move on. So it's always interesting to see conflicting reports there. Also on the 12th there, the team worked out veteran quarterback Blake Bortles. He has 73 career starts. He was the quarterback on the Jaguars team in 2018 that made the AFC Championship game. Obviously, one season doesn't make a guy's career, but that's just his notable accomplishments. And it's interesting to see the sort of quarterbacks and who the team might be looking at as we wait for Russell Wilson to return here. On October 16th, the team elevated quarterback Jake Luton and wide receiver Philip Dorsett II from the practice squad in anticipation for the game on Sunday. And then October 18th, Monday morning, Pete Carroll stated that Seattle has spoken with Cam Newton. The team did not get into specifics about the relations with Newton or what might have been said, what might have been discussed. But they have spoken to the quarterback, and they also stated that everybody who could help us. So if you know Pete Carroll and this, front office with the team, they are always in on everything. That includes every trade. Obviously you go back to the Jimmy Graham trade a few years ago, the Percy Harvin trade prior to the Super Bowl year. So I don't doubt that they're in on everything. It's just interesting to see what the team decides is good or not when it comes to who they want to acquire and who they might want to go after. In league-related news, the Washington football team retired Sean Taylor's number 21. If you don't know Sean Taylor's story, Sean Taylor is an incredibly talented football player and a family man who was killed in his own home, early on in his career. He was a really extremely hard-hitting safety, probably one of the hardest hitters of all time. Was shot and killed in his own home. And the team, Washington football team, then the Washington, well, I'm not going to say it. After that game, played with 10 men, and he's been honored ever since. Taylor's been, if you know football, for the most part, you know who Sean Taylor is. And it was just due time that his number was retired. His number 21 was retired Sunday against the Chiefs when the Washington football team played. Team president Jason Wright did apologize, though, for the short notice, as this was something that was announced, just 3 days before the game, which is kind of interesting. You'd figure with a jersey retirement, you'd kind of want to know in advance. But Washington is run really interestingly. That's the most that I'll say on that account. Monday Night Football games, wild card game will be broadcast on ESPN. ESPN already has the rights to Monday Night Football, so it just makes sense that the network hosts those Monday Night Football games that are in the playoffs. The network reached a 5-year deal to broadcast the playoff game on Monday nights. And then an NFL lawyer is part of a new email leak in the NFL. So the NFL continues to be involved in scandals over the past few weeks. The NFL's Jeff Pash and ex-Washington general manager Bruce Allen exchanged emails that included jokes about the league's diversity efforts, as well as a league fine. So more issues continue to pop up here in the NFL, just hoping that you can get these guys out of here. Because, if you've got these guys running the most popular league in the United States, it's not exactly a good thing. And it's something that, we've kind of seen throughout the years with different scandals. To finish up with our Seahawks, their record is 2-4 now. They are 4th in the NFC West. And their next game is Week 7 on Monday Night Football, October 25th, versus the New Orleans Saints with a 5:15 Pacific time kickoff. That game is on ESPN. That game will be crucial just because, you're playing in primetime once again. The Saints are coming into this game. They're getting Michael Thomas back potentially, and you're 2-4 right now. I mean, barring some collapses from, either the Rams or the Cardinals, you're probably going to finish 3rd in the division. If that, you're fighting the 49ers to get out of the basement. So that is a little bit frustrating, to say the least. Moving into our Seattle Mariners here, we have a season recap. So there's a lot to go over. So just bear with me. We're going to get through this. The MVP, my MVP was J.P. Crawford. Crawford had his best year of his career. And with Kyle Seager more than likely headed for free agency, he officially took over this leadership mantle. He was a fan favorite and will look to be the voice in the clubhouse moving into the future for a new era of Mariners baseball. His stats are as follows. He had 169 hits, 89 runs, 9 home runs, 54 RBIs, 58 walks, 3 stolen bases, a .273 batting average, a .338 on-base percentage, a .376 slugging percentage, a .715 on-base plus slugging, 233 total bases, a 102 on OPS plus, and a 3.8 WAR. JP really stepped out and had his career year, and really, to me, took over as the face of Mariners baseball this past year. Comeback player of the year had to be Mitch Haniger. After not playing at all in 2020 and missing most of the 2019 season due to injury, it was really a big question mark, at least to me, of whether or not Haniger would play himself off the team or not this year, whether it be the team deciding to not pick him up in free agency at the end of the year or trading him by the trade deadline. Mitch lit it up this past season, especially in the final homestand of the year. Seattle has club control over him this next year, so his future technically still lies with the Mariners for the time being. He had 157 hits, 110 runs, 23 doubles, 2 triples, 39 homers, 100 runs batted in, 54 walks, 1 stolen base, a .253 batting average, a .318 on-base percentage, a .485 slugging, an .804 on-base plus slugging, 64 extra base hits, 301 total bases, a .122 OPS plus, and a 2.9 WAR. He had the second most homers in a season after not appearing in a game the year before in MLB history, second only behind Willie Mays. He ranked first in runs, tied for first in homers, second in RBIs and total bases. and tied for third in extra base hits among American League outfielders in 2021. His 45 RBIs in the seventh inning and later were the most in the majors this past year. Surprise player of the year had to be Paul Sewald to me. You could give this award either to Sewald or Chris Flexen, but we will get to Flexen here in a sec. Sewald had quite the story, and it's similar to Chris Flexen, as I mentioned. Sewald came over to the Mariners after having a struggling career with the Mets. Sewald was actually the Tacoma Rainiers' opening day pitcher this past season. From there, he would join the club and become the best relief pitcher, recording 10 wins, 3 losses, a 3.06 ERA, 11 saves, 104 strikeouts, 1.02 whip, opponent's batting average of 176, a 3.08 FIP, and a 1.6 WAR. He had the second most strikeouts in the majors in 2021 by a reliever. Rookie of the year, pretty obvious to me that it was Jared Kelenic. You could argue that it could be Logan Gilbert, but Kelenic saw a rough beginning to his career. But as I've kind of talked about throughout the season, what can you really expect from a 22-year-old that was essentially sentenced to trial by fire? His month of September was much more indicative of his potential, in my opinion, and the way that he persevered should give Mariner fans even more excitement about the young man out of Waukesha, Wisconsin. He recorded 61 hits, 41 runs, 13 doubles, 1 triple, 14 homers, 43 RBIs, 6 stolen bases, 36 walks, a 1.81 average. Could use some work, as I mentioned, but as I said, 22 years old, a 2.65 on-base percentage, a 3.50 slugging, a 6.15 OPS, and a 72 OPS plus. Moving on to part 2 here. Best infielder. You could really give this to J.P. Crawford, but I didn't want to give him, MVP and best infielder. You could also make the case for Ty France to be MVP. After the San Diego trade, I immediately pegged France as the best piece of that trade. And as a whole, the trade keeps on giving, but that's not for now. After an incredible 2021, I was really tempted to throw him as the MVP, as I said, but I give JP the edge in terms of his leadership. Ty took over the first base position after previously playing second and more than likely made it his own into the future. He recorded 166 hits, 85 runs, 1 triple, 18 homers, 73 RBIs, 46 walks, a 2.91 average, a 3.68 on-base plus slugging, on-base percentage, a 4.46 slugging, an 8.12 on-base plus slugging, 27 hit by pitch. He got hit 27 times. That kind of sucks. 254 total bases, a 4.2 WAR, which led the Mariners, and a 1.28 OPS plus. He was rated as the Fangraphs best defensive first baseman in 2021, leading the American League in fielding percentage and ultimate zone rating. So maybe a Gold Glove in his future. That would be really funny to see 2 Gold Glove first basemen in Seattle, last year and this year, and both of them being different players. Best outfielder, Mitch Haniger. We've already spoken about Mitch. Best starting pitcher, Chris Flexen. Flexen, similar to Sewald, essentially was left to rot by the Mets after a rough start to his career. Chris would go on to spend some time in the Korean baseball organization when Jerry Dipoto decided to bring him over to the Mariners. The rest is history, as Flexen would end the year with a 14-6 record and the best ERA among Seattle pitchers with a 3.61 ERA. The stats, as I mentioned, 14 wins, 6 losses, a 3.61 ERA, 179.2 total innings pitched, 125 strikeouts, a 1.25 whip, opponent batting average of 2.68, a 3.89 FIP, and a 3.5 WAR, which is really high for a starting pitcher. Best relief pitcher, Paul Sewald, as I already talked about. Heading into part 3 here, players to say goodbye to, likely departures. More than likely, we're going to see Tyler Anderson leave. He fulfilled his role in 2021 that the Mariners brought him up for, eat up innings and become the 5th starter that Seattle needed after losing James Paxton to injury and relying on bullpen days. That being said, TA is a low-end starter at best and would probably be the odd man out on the opening day roster, as Seattle needs to chase a top rotation arm in free agency. Tom Murphy. Similar to Anderson, Murphy has played his role in Seattle these past few years, and that is to be a backstop while Cal Raleigh develops and potentially Luis Lorenz as well. While Raleigh is still not a finished product, Murphy did not do enough at the plate on the offensive end to salvage the negative plays that he had on the defensive end. Seattle should look to move on from the Murph. Jake Fraley. Fraley had some exciting moments. Don't get me wrong. He's a guy that was able to provide some spark from a grand slam that he had, his walk-off walk in the very first game of the season against the Giants, to his mammoth home run in Cleveland, as well as a home run robbery in Detroit. All of that is stained, though, by the fact that Fraley had to miss the best stretch of his season and career due to COVID, that stretch being in the middle of a hot streak for him and the Mariners. And you could argue that his impact was deeply felt in those games that the Mariners lost. That mistake, in addition to the fact that Seattle will be loaded at the outfield position anyway next year, leaves Fraley as an odd man out and potential trade fodder. Evan White. I don't like putting Evan White on this list. I'm an Evan White fan, but with Ty France effectively taking over the first base position, as I talked about in his recap, it may have sealed White out of the equation. He's struggled to get consistency at the plate the past 2 years, but some time in Tacoma should help with that. He does have pop. It just needs to all come together. Where he heads after Tacoma is anyone's guess, and that may not be Seattle. Holes to fill. Catcher, starting pitcher, third base, second base. Catcher, you got Cal Raleigh, yes, but you need a veteran presence as this team is looking to push for the playoffs next year. Starting pitcher, this team really needs a front of the rotation pitcher. There are going to be a lot of options on the free agency market, so it's just up for Seattle to pick the right one and go after them. Third base, the writing has essentially been on the wall for Kyle Seager from this front office. Do the fans feel that way? I would say mostly no. I don't feel that way. I'd love to have Kyle back, but with the way there was a send-off in the last game of the year, in the way that the team hasn't confirmed or already picked up his option, more than likely K-Swag will not be with the team next year, and the team will have to look to fill that third base position. Could that be Abraham Toro? Potentially, but for the time being, the team may look to add to third base. Second base, this is a position that has been talked about. Topoto and Scott Service have talked about adding more offense in the infield. Second base is more than likely the position they're talking about. I highly doubt they move J.P. Crawford or Ty France from their spots. So with that being said, more than likely second base is somewhere they look at. Main issues. The team needs to add a consistent bat that could come in the position of a designated hitter, a.k.a. Nelson Cruz. Would love to have Boomstick back. Or just adding more, an important second baseman. Need to add a front of the rotation pitcher and staying healthy. This team had a lot of injuries this year. Two of the main ones being Kyle Lewis, who won Rookie of the Year 2020, and starting pitcher James Paxton. Potential additions include, this is just me being hopeful for some of them. Obviously, it's more than likely that you're not going to get all these guys, maybe one or two of them. Clayton Kershaw is a free agent. He may move on from the Dodgers. Max Scherzer, if the Dodgers are able to rally from their 2-0 hole against the Braves, Scherzer, wins a World Series, he may look on to move on and start a new challenge. Marcus Stroman's more likely than those two other guys. He has some upside and he has some young talent, but he may be somebody that the team has to get in a bidding war for. Second baseman Marcus Semien. He is the guy that a lot of Mariners fans are looking at that could decide whether or not they see this offseason as bust or not. Infielder Trevor Story may move the shortstop from shortstop to second. Nelson Cruz. It would make sense to just have that veteran hitting presence on the team and to have a consistent DH. You saw the Mariners this year. You saw that they cycled throughout DHs all year. And then Noah Syndergaard. Syndergaard was somebody that was injured this past season, and he could be a comeback player of the year candidate if he's able to rejuvenate himself, and he could do that here in Seattle. Best game, to me, had to be game 162 against the Angels. 44,000 strong in T-Mobile Park. Mitch Haniger rips a single into the third base shortstop gap, helps win the Mariners the game. Place was rocking. It was incredible and gave hope that we might see the playoffs heading into Sunday. Obviously, that didn't happen on Sunday, but that was the best game of the year to me. As we look forward into the next season, what are we looking forward to? Continued development of young talent, whether it be Logan Gilbert, Jared Kelenic, Cal Raleigh. Those are just three of the starters that we saw, and those are the guys that are on the major league level. More improvements at T-Mobile Park. As the park looks towards 2023 and the All-Star Game, it always looks to improve itself year in and year out and provide the best fan experience that is possible. And I feel like they do a good job of that compared to other ballparks that I've been to. So expect to see more improvements to the ballpark itself. A re-energized fan base. seeing 44,000 strong those last 3 games, and just the last month of September, seeing all the Mariners stuff that I usually wouldn't see in September, as September typically means that the Seahawks are back. It's great to see that, and I'm hoping that we see, consistent fans, consistent great crowds throughout the year next year, and hopefully, we get more out of this pandemic than we are already. And then Julio Rodriguez. Julio Rodriguez is the top 10 prospect in the entire MLB system. He's going to provide great upside, and highly likely that we see him next season, as well as the rest of the farm. This team has a young farm system that is really good, that is ranked really high. So expect them to contribute more as they did this season. So that has been your Mariners season recap. I know we got through it, but I missed last week, and I don't like leaving things and not doing them. Team news, end of the season press conference that the Mariners had. Both Jerry Dipoto and Scott Service spoke. It was mostly Dipoto. But Dipoto noted the payroll budget will increase for next season. He's doubled down on that request to ownership. No idea how much that may mean money-wise. They will wait to finalize their decisions on Kyle Seager and Yusei Kikuchi until that deadline comes up. He was not certain if Kyle Lewis or Evan White will be ready to go for spring training. Both him and Service said that they want to add offense and could do so at multiple positions, as I mentioned, including at least one infield spot. So who knows what that means? Maybe a second baseman and a third baseman. That is up for us to see in the offseason. And he expects J.P. Crawford to be the Mariners shortstop for a long time. I would love to see that, and I'm sure a lot of Mariners fans would as well. In league-related notes, the MLB is finalizing a policy that requires all minor league players to be vaccinated before the 2022 season. That's a big deal, considering that most of the Mariners in the Major League club weren't vaccinated to begin with. So that could be something important to see, as you see some guys, bouncing between Tacoma and Seattle. They're going to have to be vaccinated regardless. And then this is a really cool move. The MLB will give housing to minor league players. The league owners agreed unanimously to acquire teams to provide housing for minor league players starting next year in 2022. If you know anything about baseball, as well as minor league baseball, you know that minor league conditions aren't great. They're really not. A lot of guys are fighting just to make rosters, just to eat every day, sleeping in cars, sharing apartments. So to provide housing for these players is really cool, just because, a lot of them have great talent. They're on the verge of making the rosters in the major leagues. They just are either dealing with a crowded roster in the MLB, or they just haven't made it yet. No formal plan has been announced yet, though. But that is still really cool to see from the major leagues. And hopefully it's good news to continue to better this league going forward. For our Seattle Sounders, over the past week, they took on the Houston Dynamo on the road. They would lose that game, sadly, 2-1. Going down to Houston, playing in Houston is always tough, whether it's the condition or the team itself. But they would lose that game 2-1. Player of the game would be Jimmy Medranda. 1 goal on 1 shot, 1 on target. He had a 72.7 pass percentage to go along with that. The Sounders lose to the 12th in the West ranked Dynamo on the road. Tough loss, but it's a long season in the MLS. You're not going to win them all. The team record sits at 17 wins, 6 draws, and 6 losses. They are still first in the Western Conference. They are second, though, in the MLS still with 57 points, as obviously the New England Revolution have 66 points, I believe. So that's, technically you're still available to do so, but more than likely going to be incredibly tough to pass New England in that regard. Looking ahead, October 20th, they will go to Colorado to play the Rapids at 6 p.m. Pacific time. On October 23rd, they will return home to play Sporting Kansas City, second in the MLS Western Conference Kansas City at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time kickoff. Now we transition over to the Seattle Storm season recap. MVP has to go with Stewie. It's Stewie's world. We're just living in it. This year, Stewie averaged 20.3 points per game, 9.5 rebounds per game, with 2.7 assists per game. She shot 43% from the field, 33% from 3 points. and was 5th in the WNBA in total points, 3rd in points per game, 7th in total rebounds, 4th in rebounds per game, 4th in total blocks, 3rd in blocks per game, 8th in defensive rating, 4th in player efficiency rating, 7th in win shares, and added several trophies and a wedding ring to her name. She continues to be the engine that makes Seattle go, and it was obvious that she did not suit up. It will be vital to not only re-sign Stewie, but also to perhaps give her a little more help this offseason. Defensive Player of the Year, Jewel Lloyd. Lloyd has quite possibly her biggest year yet, and while most of that was in part due to her offensive explosions, one example, scoring 37 points in the final regular season game of the year, which was a league high for the year. Her defense gained recognition as well. As the primary guard defender for this team, she led the Storm in steals per game with 1.5, averaged 3.3 defensive rebounds per game, and was labeled as a snub for one of the WNBA defensive teams this year. It will be crucial for Seattle to retain her as well as the rest of the big three, as I kind of mentioned there with Stewie. Comeback Player of the Year, kind of hard to give anybody on the Storm this candidate just because the Storm are such a well-run organization. But Russell saw her minutes and all of her stats go up compared to last year significantly, so it makes her case for this award obvious. In her 5th year in the league, she made big strides and showed flashes of great talent that if she can sustain that, she could lead to another big jump next year. Surprise Player of the Year, Steph Talbot. Talbot was a part of the huge whirlwind of trades that saw several players, including Katie Lou Samuelson, who we'll talk about next, come to Seattle. In one of those trades, the rights to Stephanie Talbot were listed and seemed like a general afterthought. This would not be the case, as Talbot offered great defensive presence and was a key piece of the bench off the bench in terms of scoring. She did see limited playing time, with Katie Lou Samuelson beating her out for more minutes, but Talbot plays a key role off the bench and should be vital to this team's second unit if brought back next year. The decision could be made by Seattle, though, as she is a restricted free agent. In part 2 of our recap, new face of the year, Katie Lou Samuelson. Samuelson was acquired in exchange for the number 1 pick in the draft, as well as others. The Storm received heat for this because, if you know sports, any number 1 overall pick holds immense potential value. Considering the difficult draft coming out of a pandemic year, it makes some sense, though, why Seattle wanted a proven commodity and went the trade route. Samuelson is young, has offensive scoring potential, and started to catch her stride as the season really rolled on. Lou is only 24 years old and scored 18 points in the second-round playoff game against Phoenix, leading the team, and should have competed in the 3v3 Olympics basketball had it not been for an unfortunate breakthrough COVID case. Expect her to get even better next year as she gets more comfortable in this team. Best guard had to be Jewel Lloyd. Best forward had to be Breanna Stewart. Best big, I would go with Mercedes Russell, giving her the edge over Ezi Magbagor. Looking at holes to fill for this team, potentially point guard. Assuming that Stewie and Jewel Lloyd are retained, the next big question mark leaves Sue Bird. Where does she want to do? Does she want to retire or come back for another year? The 41-year-old will need an heir apparent at some point, and whether that is Jordan Canada or somebody else, this team will need to add another point guard on this roster if Sue decides to hang the sneakers up. And then big. I don't really have too many holes for this team. It's just kind of be point guard and big. The team has Magbagor on a club option and Russell as a restricted free agent, but the team could look to get a bigger presence inside and maybe move on from Russell and have that big help develop a young Magbagor even more. Potential additions. Liz Cambage, Stephanie Dolson, and Tina Charles are all potential bigs and veterans that could help Seattle have a key presence inside while also helping further on the development of Magbagor. Will Seattle have that money or space to attract a veteran big is a real question. And then, as I mentioned, since there's not too many holes to fill, I didn't really have that many additions that I could look at. Kelsey Plum. Plum is a former Husky who has had a resurgence this year in Vegas after missing most of the season with an injury. She is a free agent in 23 and could move to Seattle via free agency then. But depending on the decision that Sue Bird makes, the Storm may be in need of point guard help sooner rather than later, and Plum could flourish back home. Best game, August 12th versus the Connecticut Sun, the Commissioner's Cup final. This game really seemed to be when Seattle had really hit their stride. The Olympians had returned from the Olympics, having won a gold medal. some of them had. They won this game 79-57 in a blowout, and they had a great record at the time. Then the wheels effectively fell off. What to look forward to for our Storm? They're going to be playing back home next season at Climate Pledge Arena. Some potential new additions could come to Seattle, whether that's a veteran big, a point guard, or potentially more bench help. That is set to be seen. Another potential year of Sue Bird. We may get another year of Sue Bird. We may not. That still has to be a decision that Sue makes. Getting to see development from several younger players, whether that's Magbagor, I'd put Russell on that list. There's more players on this list that we didn't see. Micaiah Herbert Harrigan missed this past season. She was a draft pick for the Storm. She missed season with a pregnancy. So more potential young players developing. The continued rise of Jewel Lloyd with, hoping that Jewel Lloyd comes back next year. We continue to see more and more Jewel Lloyd as she continues to be herself and continues to get better. As well as you could say the same about Stewie. So with that being said, good year for the Storm overall, but obviously, when you've got the talent you do and you look at this organization, the way that it's handled itself, you kind of hold yourself to a championship or bust mentality. And that's tough because you look at the WNBA finals each year and you say, I want to be there. You're not going to make the finals every year. So it's up to the front office, the coaching staff, as well as the current players that are on the roster to really see what needs to be worked on and get to it. In injury-related news, Breanna Stewart underwent successful surgery for a minor repair and reinforcement of the Achilles tendon in her left leg. Team-related news, the 2021 All-WNBA teams were announced. Stewie and Jewel Lloyd earned first-team honors. Stewie finished third in MVP voting, and she became the fastest player in league history to record 2,500 points and 1,000 rebounds in career. And then last little piece about the Storm and the WNBA as a whole, League Commissioner Kathy Engelbert outlined a transformative plan to pivot the league from survive to thrive. It's an interesting thing. Since, the league inception, ratings have continued to go up and up and up. Viewership's gone up. So it's just sort of a matter of time until this league gains more recognition, and it has been for years now. So it's really key that this transformative plan to pivot the league from survive to thrive follows just those two words, surviving to thriving. 3 words, pardon me. Now, for the first time in Circling Shell Sports on Converge, we have Kraken news. That's pretty fun to see. October 12th versus the Vegas Golden Knights in the opening night of the NHL season. The team would lose their opener 4-3. Player of the game would be Vince Dunn. He had 1 assist, 3 shots on goal, 2 hits, 2 gross value added, and 2 takeaways. Takeaways are effectively interceptions. Seattle was down 3-0 at one point. They were able to fight back, rally, and play really hard against a team that has that championship or bust label on them. So for them to go and challenge Vegas in Vegas is really impressive. In their second game of the year, they traveled down to Nashville to play the Predators. They would win that game by a similar score of 4-3. Player of the game would be Brandon Tanev. He scored 2 goals with 2 shots on goal. He had 4 hits and 1 gross value added. So the Kraken get their second win ever, their first win ever, in their second ever game. On October 16th at the Columbus Blue Jackets, the team would play travel to Columbus. They would lose that game 1-2 in overtime. Player of the game would be Brandon Tanev. He had 1 goal in the second period, 3 shots on goal, 2 hits, and 2 blocks. So coming out of that first road trip, effectively, first 3 games, 1-2 record, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Overall, just happy to have hockey back here in Seattle. Back in the day with the Metropolitans, with them being the first team in America to win the Stanley Cup. That's pretty impressive. And a little piece of history for you there. So it's good to have Kraken hockey back. But yeah, as I mentioned, to go down and challenge Vegas in their own home, it's pretty impressive to me. Especially, as I said, with that championship or bust mentality. It's pretty cool to see. In terms of injury news, on October 13th, the team placed forward Marcus Johansson on IR with a lower body injury. Now, I know we talked about IR with the NFL. 3 weeks now is the minimum stay. IR in hockey means that the player is ineligible to compete in games for at least 7 days. They can do team meetings, travel with the club, team meals, and participate in practice. They just can't play in games. So IR is not as bad as other leagues. October 16th, Vince Dunn missed the game at Columbus, and since then has been considered day-to-day. Fun fact, Vince Dunn was in the first Kraken fight. Vince Dunn was significantly smaller than the Nashville Predators player that he fought, but, proud for him for sticking up for the team and getting in that fight. Just hope that it doesn't mean he's got an injury that lasts any significant amount of time. Team-related notes. This is really cool. I'm going to pass it off now. So Big O was able to head over to Climate Pledge Arena, check things out. I was able to do so as well. It's, at least from what I can say, it's going to be a really high-tech arena. Really impressed me. I mean, if you've been to Key Arena in the past, which I hope you have, the differences are huge. And it's really exciting that arena will be able to host, obviously, the Kraken, but the Storm as well. And down the line, the Sonics, in addition to all the concerts and different events that they have planned. So I think they've done a really good job, whether it's the arena itself, the people that work with that, setting that up, as well as the Kraken and the Storm and how they set things up and how they have planned things for this new arena here in Seattle. In other team-related notes, October 11th, the team claimed forward Alex Barré-Boulet off of waivers from Tampa Bay. I did not mean to rhyme there. That was just part of it. October 13th, the team recalled forward Cole Lind from Charlotte Checkers, the AHL affiliate, and re-signed forward Alex True to Charlotte. October 14th, Dennis Cholowski was claimed off of waivers by Washington. So one of the team's several defensemen gets claimed. Sucks to see, but when you've got depth like that, ultimately something like that's going to happen. So the team sits at a 1-win and effectively 2-loss. But hockey's interesting because since the Kraken went to overtime against Columbus, it's considered an overtime slot. So, in soccer, it's 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss, right? No. Hockey, 1 win, 1 loss, 1 overtime. But effectively, if you're doing it with the knowledge that I've got, or if you're doing it in standard scoring, it's 1 win and 2 losses. The team has 3 points. The division standing, they're second behind Edmonton in the Pacific Division. Their next games are October 18th at the Philadelphia Flyers with a 4 p.m. Pacific time puck drop. October 19th at the New Jersey Devils with a 4 p.m. Pacific time puck drop. And then they come home October 23rd to play the Vancouver Canucks, 7 p.m. Pacific time puck drop in the home opener at Climate Pledge Arena. So that will be exciting to have the Kraken here in front of fans in Climate Pledge Arena, get everything going, just to get things kicked off. Now we're going to head over, got something new. This is something that I've been a part of, but hasn't necessarily been added to the show yet. It's really exciting for me to add this just because of the passion that I have for this team and, their significance relating to Seattle. Adding the OL Reign to the show. We added the Kraken this week, adding the Reign next week. So the Reign are, if you might have known them, they used to be the Seattle Reign. They played in Memorial Stadium. Their season in the league started back in 2013. They played at Memorial Stadium. They had a logo that was similar to the Starbucks logo. It's the Professional Women's League, Women's Soccer League here in Seattle. If you know the U.S. Women's National Team, Alex Morgan, Sydney Leroux, Megan Rapinoe, all those women, Christian Press, they all play in the NWSL. So if you ever go, oh, wow, U.S. Women's National Team, they're really good. They play here in the States. They have club teams. More than likely you've got a team. Here in Seattle, they're not in Seattle anymore. They do play down in Tacoma and Cheney Stadium, home of the Rainiers, but they're still world class. The Reign are second in the NWSL table. They're second in the league right now behind Portland. So if you know the Sounders and the Portland rivalry and just that rivalry that already exists there, rivalry exists in the NWSL as well. The Reign have clinched a playoff berth. So they're already made playoffs. And with that being said, if they win their final game of the season against KC on October 30th, they are guaranteed a first round bye. So yet another successful team in the area, women's soccer. We'll get to that next week. With that being said, a lot going on. Seahawks lost against Pittsburgh. We had the Mariners season recap. The Sounders dropped a game to the Dynamo in Houston. We had the Storm season recap. We got some Kraken, man, and then heading the rain. So a good amount of stuff to go over this past week. As always, just happy to be able to do everything, and appreciative to the people that have helped me put me in this position. With that being said, we'll be back with you next week for another slate of Seattle sports. Until that time comes, you take care. We'll see you later.